Welcome to another episode of Salesforce Trails and Trials, where we help you accelerate your career and turn soft skills into hard money by mining gold from project failures, bringing insights from ecosystem experts and inspiration from others on the trail. Now joining us with over 20 years in the ecosystem, please welcome our host, John Cline.
Thank you for joining another episode of Salesforce Trails and Trials. This is a guest episode from the Salesforce Career Show, a leading podcast helping people soar higher and get hired in the Salesforce ecosystem. They provided an opportunity for us to share how we're helping turn soft skills into hard money, and I would love for you to listen in, and if you find it valuable, subscribe to their show as well. Enjoy the show, and we'll see you next week.
Okay, well, welcome everybody to the Salesforce Career Show. When you've got highly developed leadership and communication skills, it invariably leads to substantially more income. It impacts your team, it impacts your clients in very, very positive ways. One of the things I love about it is it actually protects you from AI encroachment. You know, there's certain qualities about leaders and highly valuable communicators in the Salesforce ecosystem that if you have these skills, you're really future-proofing your own career. We're going to be talking to John Cline, founder of People First Method. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and introduce my lovely co-host, Vanessa Grant, and John Cline, our guest of the day. He's got 20 years of experience in the ecosystem. Maybe you could just give us the quick 20-second highlight about yourself and what People First Method does.
My pleasure. It's great to be with you today. This is my 24th year in the Salesforce ecosystem. I have 14 certs, including one in user experience from Nielsen Norman. I'm a solution architect, so I'm deep in the weeds in the Salesforce world. Love just kind of working with people in the trenches. And out of that process of working with people over the years, I found that there are significant gaps in how we bring about customer success, that what we find on Trailhead, though it's tremendously beneficial, I was with Salesforce before there was Trailhead, those are very valuable, but there's a tremendous amount of depth and skill outside of our technical expertise that actually makes the key differences in a project and its success. And in fact, the top 3 causes for project failure, looking at over 20,000 projects over the last 50, 60 years, are all non-technical in nature. So really what I'm trying to help with is bring about more customer success, more project success for the consultants, admins, product owners, all the roles out there, and ultimately help our entire ecosystem raise the bar as it relates to bringing about meaningful digital transformation for businesses today.
I love it. And can you enlighten our listeners what kind of commitment that might look like to join a cohort with your organization?
That's a great question. And I think it's very important for people to consider this because unlike Trailhead, where I can go and if I want to grab a super badge, I just roll up, I can do that. I can plan an afternoon, a week, whatever it's going to take for me to basically binge that and knock it out. Whether I remember all of the details about what I did is a little bit less important than achieving it and getting the accomplishment. I can always refer back to what I did. When it comes to our own personal habits and our ruts and our evasive maneuvers and the ways that we sometimes respond to conversations or react to accusations, those are a little bit more deep in our lives. Many of these things are habits that we've had since we were kids. They're things that when conflict arises, I kind of put on this particular type of behavior, and it takes a minute to actually find it and ultimately figure out how we are going to move forward and transform and change that. So because of that, we intentionally slowed down the process. So it's on-demand courseware is the majority of what we do. And though I might be able to get through the entire thing within, let's say, 3 to 4 weeks, we wouldn't be able to kind of marinate and get the benefit of our peers who are learning with us. And within that cohort, you wouldn't be able to benefit from the coach that's actually kind of learning about you, seeing about your responses in the courseware and tailoring the courseware to you and the cohort. So that's why we essentially look at doing 1 vignette or lesson per week to help you take the courseware in the beginning, process it, let it marinate, figure out, why do I do that? What am I thinking? What are some other options? And then bring that to our 1 hour meeting every week, which is the only synchronous portion. And now we can actually talk about that to the benefit of our entire cohort, which is a very small, we do no more than 12 people with the coach. And that's the goal, because changing our intangibles, changing those aspects that we've had as habits for the last 15 years, most people don't even recognize a lot of these things on the conscious level. And so we first have to surface them, then we process them, and then actually we have the opportunity to change them.
I love all of that, John. I was chatting with a very close friend of mine recently, and we talked quite a bit about his business, sometimes mine, but mostly about his business. And one of the things that he shared with me is full of great quips. But one of the things he shared is that there are certain people in the world who actually have an addiction to low-paying work. And think about that for a minute. Do you know someone who does? I do. I talked to 2 people today who should be earning somewhere between 120 and 150, and they're asking for 90 because the market's got them a little freaked out. We'll talk about the market here in a few minutes. Do you envision that some of those folks are perfect candidates for this kind of education?
They could be. And in my experience, I've also seen people like that. And they have such great potential. You see them, you interact with them. And I find that sometimes people, whether it's out of a little anxiety, whether it's out of fear, they often divert to coping mechanisms and just an acceptance of, I'm just not good with people. I'm just not good in meetings, where there's multiple people. I'm just not good presenting, right? And in my opinion, those are all lies. Those are all skills. Just like if I wanted to get better at baseball, I would just need to understand the mechanics of baseball, right? There's a swing, there's a pitch. I need to just get better at my hand-eye coordination. I'm not going to be, Bo Jackson, but I can be better. And I think the same is absolutely true with all of these intangibles, and the people who are maybe leaning on those coping mechanisms and saying, that's fine, I'll let somebody else do the leading. I'll let someone else lead the solution design. I'll let someone else do this, and they defer. There's such an opportunity for them to step into that role with greater confidence. It doesn't mean you have to know everything. It just means that you have to step up to your next level. And when you can step up to your next level, it opens up a whole new echelon of kind of growth off of that plateau.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and I mean, just from my personal experience, and I did not have a great cohort to teach me this stuff, but certainly I think what do they say that growth growth is where happens when you're in that discomfort zone, where things don't feel completely comfortable. And I think a lot of times in this ecosystem, I don't know about particularly, but certainly I've seen it a lot in this ecosystem where people have very self-limiting beliefs.
Yes.
I am not this, or I am this. I'm not a solution architect is also another one. I'm not technical enough is another one. And I think once people have these kind of self-limiting beliefs and put themselves into these boxes, they're not leaving that opportunity for growth. Being open to evolving and being open to doing things scared is so important, especially if you want your career to grow. If you want to see how deep that ocean is as far as your talents and your skill sets. You don't know what you don't know unless you try.
I had a conversation with someone today, just today, an interview. Very bright, very capable, smart, deeply experienced. I'd classify him as an A+ higher, except he might not quite get the plus. And it's because he has imposter syndrome. And he said a couple things that really stood out for me. One of the things that he shared was that he's never really wanted to push too hard in self-promotion. And what I was getting from him is almost this idea that, like, to do that would potentially be rude. There's an idea in some people with imposter syndrome to get ahead or to promote yourself is somehow stepping on other people to get there, right? It's the same way that some people who don't have a whole lot of, they don't have 2 coins to rub together might feel negative just in general about people who are financially stable or financially successful. It's just a thing. Usually it comes from childhood, right? Usually somewhere in there, that's where it comes from. But it should be washed out because it's a different version of having blinders on or living by a myth, because it's really a myth, right? Not for all communities, but it's an absolute myth. Does your program at all address some of these things that we're talking about?
It does. And just to speak to the example of imposter syndrome, everybody deals with imposter syndrome. And the bottom line is imposter syndrome will be present in all of our lives until we prove it to ourselves that we are no longer an imposter. No one can tell us. All they can do is give us the opportunity to step into. And so what the program highlights is, one, there's two parts to this. One is the individual me as I traverse and navigate my own professional world. And there's also how can I create a context and a setting that encourages other people to step up and do the very thing that I need to do. Both of those elements can be done at the same time, and they really start with understanding the impact of culture and values on what it is that we're doing. And that's why we call it the people first method, because yes, it's about technology, delivery, customer success, and we're focused on the Salesforce ecosystem. But in order for that to be successful, we have to be people first in our posture and in our perspective. And absolutely it helps. And the key here is knowing what I need is very common to other people and what they need. So the more that I can achieve that next level status in my own life, the more I can leave a wake of welcome behind me to others to do the exact same thing, to say, you know what, I still feel like an imposter, for example, when I get into solution design with integrations. But I used to feel that with everything. But now I can data model freely around standard and custom objects, around automations, and I'm working on getting better about, web services and integrations. Other people can walk and follow the same path, and our program starts with that element of understanding the vital role of culture and values and teaching people to essentially put on a new set of people first glasses, to have a different rubric with the way that they see the world and the way that they discern what's happening in those conversations, because the same things that are true for you and for me as Salesforce pros are absolutely true in every role inside that business. So think about at the table, there's people who are present who don't feel like they should be there, or who have had the business tell them their opinion is not welcome, that their role is not respected, that they're just to be quiet and do the work. And then there's people who are not at the table yet. They're not even invited yet, but they should be. People from the warehouse, the guy who runs the forklift, right? The gal who does the shipping and receiving. They're the stakeholders of this project, and they're not even present yet. So it's our job as Salesforce pros to create that kind of priority and welcome, so that the right people are at the table at the right time, and that they're put in a posture that they're free to be transparent and vulnerable, because ultimately some of them have already failed at this process. So I'd say probably at least 1 year of experience is probably a good, kind of a good benchmark.
I mean, can someone who's not working have the same opportunity to apply what they're learning on a regular basis if they're not currently engaged in employment?
That's absolutely possible. And in fact, they might want to take advantage of a bit of the availability and the downtime to make the most of it. From my perspective, I mean, we had one of our graduates from the last cohort last year who essentially got hired and got promoted within 8 months. And they had never had a Salesforce career prior. They came out of organizational leadership, and ultimately they actually came from one of the other tactical programs and needed more. And so they came to our program and really accelerated what they were looking to do. So I really think it's that attitude that we talked about earlier. If you're wanting to step into a role and think about, upskilling and upthinking to your next role, maybe you're an admin and you want to try and move into a senior BA role, or you want to, move into a product owner, or maybe even a junior architect, right? There's aspects on the people first side. That's what's going to get you there, because Salesforce, right? We have 400 pages of release notes 3 times a year. Nobody knows everything about any of it, right? That stuff can be grown along the way.
But what I like about your system is it's a controlled system. And I've gone through cohorts before with recruiter education. I've absolutely loved it. I'm still friends with people. This is 6 years later, 7 years later. I'm still friends. We're still bouncing ideas off of each other. In fact, the only reason why I've got a YouTube channel at all is because of these friends, right? From a cohort from 6 years ago. So it will pay dividends.
I resonate a lot with almost feeling like my soft skills were stronger than my technical skills. So a lot of what you're saying is really resonant, and it can take you pretty far in the tech industry where sometimes the hardest thing is people, not even the tech solution.
We're complicated, right? I mean,
Yeah.
people are really, we're really complicated.
And I was just going to add this little bit. I think at least what I've seen sometimes is folks that maybe don't lean on the soft skills side of the fence, or like, okay, it's okay, I could just run my emails through AI and that'll do it, or I can figure out what questions I should ask in a discovery through AI. And having this kind of the coaching where you can actually develop these skills is going to get you so much further if you actually have a real human. The problem with AI is AI has got no empathy. AI is not going to be able to understand what it means when to read people's facial expressions. It's not going to understand that when you walk into a room as a consultant the first time, that person's going to be scared that you're going to impact their job, and is not going to ask questions or phrase them appropriately, to accommodate that empathy, leave room for those feelings. And that's where, can AI do great things? Yes. Is it going to develop these soft skills in a way that will get you further in your career, where you are the person who is leading the AI, not the AI leading you? Making sure you develop these soft skills is so important, especially with this AI future coming.
So let's talk a little bit about a solution to get out of bad commitments and to say no by saying yes. John Cline, you have the floor.
I'll just have one comment on kind of role erosion by AI, because it's very real and it's happening. AI is not going to have compassion on you for your prior circumstances and history, right? When I type in things, it doesn't know I was a foster kid and I'm dealing with my own challenges, right? So it's a very good point on our capability of humans that will be unsurpassed. So let's give some background here just for the circumstance. So imagine you're a business analyst and you're working on, a release, right? You're kind of putting together a demo, you're putting it together with the client, and you go through the process, you tell a great story with the demo, and in the demo are two additional people that you've not met yet. And so you give the demo, your stakeholder says, hey, this is great, love the way this is looking. And then the other two stakeholders you find out are the CFO and the newly hired CTO who you haven't met yet. And this is their first engagement with you. And they say, this is really great. We're excited with what we see here. And I know we have a new renewal coming up on the contract, right? Because this is the CFO. All we need to see is ABC added to that demo, maybe a transformation, a little automation. From their perspective, it's simple, should be no big deal. We just need to see that in our next demo, which we'd like to see before our board meeting in 5 days. Can you do that? In this case, right, it's work for free or it's work over the weekend, right? You had a wedding you were going to attend, right, with your family, and now you have to stay. And it's not just you. In order to put that demo together, you have a developer you're working with. It doesn't really matter the circumstance of whether it's an internal staff or external Salesforce partner or SI. The same is true. Ultimately, you found yourself in a predicament where that executive is asking something unreasonable. This happens all the time.
Here, if you don't mind, I'll even share something that happened to me really recently. I had a so I'm going to be traveling soon for work, and so I had a manager say, "Well, since you're going to be traveling that day and it's going to be a long trip, we're just going to need that deliverable sooner." And I'm like, okay, so it's the do more with less. And so I was telling somebody about it, and they're like, yeah, time is finite unless you're in Salesforce Consulting.
Yes, it's a good point. And the more you think about this category, you start to find that there's people who, I call this boundary jumping. People are totally fine to jump your boundaries, and as long as they get what they're looking for. And sometimes people aren't even conscious that they're doing this. They've just been having this habit that this is how they treat their lower staff people, their consultants, whoever it might be. I just get stuff done. This is how I get done. I grind people and I boundary jump. There's cultural and relational dimensions that are essentially eroded and degraded with this. So given the fact that this is a reality, this is going to happen, I want to ask a question. Let's say that, right, that BA or that admin in that scenario, she responds to the request and says, I'm sorry, I can't do that. What's the emotional response of the two stakeholders that are there, the CFO and the CTO? How do they feel?
Well, people who are in leadership positions tend not to like to hear the word no.
You are correct. They don't like to hear the word no. And in fact, when they hear the word no, commonly what happens is they stop listening to anything else you might say, because now they are so frustrated. What did you just say? But they're not going to say that. But that's what they're thinking. Kind of like the moment you had, Josh, when you just had all the things swirling in your head. There's an aspect of like, wait, did you understand who I am? All of this. So my recommendation is I encourage people not to say no. And we provide a simple formula. So this is 1 week's lesson. And the program, particularly this lesson, is called This Is What I Can Do. And it's essentially a formula. And many of our alumni have told me that they take a Post-it note and they stick it right below their monitor so that when they get in these situations and their heart rate goes, whoop, right? When that happens, because they feel the tension and they don't like it. And they're hospitality oriented, they're people pleasers, which is a beautiful thing in the right context. In this context, though, they're about to commit their entire team to work over the weekend by saying yes. And they really need to be empowered to figure out how to get out of that situation while preserving those relationships. So the formula that I recommend after presenting the background is we need to do 3 things. First thing we need to do is we need to validate the ask. We need to tell them, you know what you're asking for is really valuable. I see how this is really going to impact the business, and I'm really glad you brought it up. The second thing we do is we validate the assignment. You know what? I'm really glad that you believe in us in such a way, because that's a really tight turnaround. And I'm really happy you have confidence in us that we're able to accomplish something of that measure and significance in such a short amount of time. So I validated the ask, I validated the assignment, and now I make my offer of compromise. Thinking about it, I need to connect with my team, but what I can do is I know we have a little time on Friday that we can open up and we can explore this more deeply and really figure out what the finish line looks like. And we can take some time early on Monday, because I know the team has a meeting that I can push to the back of the week, and we can open up some more time there. How does that sound? I never said no, but I also never committed to anything more than I was willing to commit to. And the benefit there is all the executives in the room, they're still listening to me. They're still hearing and they're processing what I said. And there's an aspect where me as the technical professional in the room, where there's an aspect of I know more about what it's going to take, who is going to be involved, what the actual downstream elements are around testing and UAT and all of the aspect of how they've been doing. I know way more about that than they do. And so that mystery becomes my asset in this arrangement. But the key here is that I was able to focus back on my storytelling and my demo and keep the meeting back on track. I never said no. This is my first time meeting these 2 people. All they heard was yes to something, and we'll do that. And now we'll help define the finish line, and I'll reserve the difficult conversation when we go to figure out the finish line and say, great, running a marathon is too much, but running a sprint is probably likely. So here's what we can do again. And I basically reapply the same principle over and over and over. Validate the ask, validate the assignment, and make my offer of compromise.
I love
I
it.
really love that too. And again, I also raised my hand with having seen that literally a few weeks ago in my line of work. One of the things that, when you are at a lower level, you think, oh, I don't have the authority to speak to it. But the reality is, even if you're not in a leadership position, anything you say, the client will hear it and then say, oh, they said they can do it. Now, you almost devalue your work if you say yes to everything.
You're right.
If you go into that room and say, oh, I can complete this, you set yourself up for a deadline. And if it's not the highest quality you wanted, you never gave yourself even an opportunity to say, hey, if I'm given X time, the value of me spending the extra time is you'll actually meet your goal. So much of what you said was like so true. And one of the things, how did it make you feel? Oh my gosh, he's not a team player. He just dismissed any of my requests and feelings. And frankly, just I don't want to talk to you anymore. I want to talk to your leader. Maybe your leader will work with me. And
And I want to highlight one thing you just mentioned there, which is really good. So this is essentially a theme across all of our vignettes, is the ability to leverage communication as a recon device. And you just highlighted an example there. So first of all, if I'm looking to move to the next echelon of my career, I want to get a 20% boost in my next salary negotiation. Is that more likely by me saying yes or by me saying no? me saying no and recognizing that I'm the one who actually understands this and you put me responsible for this, and so I'm going to take responsibility. The second aspect is exactly what you highlighted. By me putting myself out there and stating my offer of compromise, I wait and listen and just put up my antennae, and I know what kind of people am I dealing with. Are they people who are attuned to relational dynamics? Do they recognize that I'm a valuable part of this organization? And if you continue jumping my boundaries, I am out of here because there's 10 companies behind you who want me. And if you're not one of them, I'm happy to move on to the next because I am qualified, I am skilled, I am capable. And I'm not going to be put in an environment where I am, put under someone's thumb as though everything is negotiable and all of this is just magic.
Yeah, I love it. I keep thinking of the really straightforward chapter 1, Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference, favorite book on negotiating. And when he just says, yeah, that's great, but how am I supposed to do that? Right. And getting the other person to come up with the actual solution instead of saying yes to what they think is the right thing, to do first. And I think too, you bring up a really good point. I mean, the validate. I mean, you guys do that when you're building product, aren't you? I mean, you're constantly validating. So why wouldn't you do it in a human context, right? It's absolutely necessary. And making certain that people feel heard, that you have a clear understanding of it is critical. You may devalue the quality of your work or the perception of your capabilities by saying yes to everything. And I absolutely believe in that. And there's a reason behind that. How is it being devalued? Well, people are picking up these subtle inputs that you're not discerning. If you can't protect your own time, how can you protect theirs? If you're a pushover, how good a quality are your ideas actually? You don't want to be a pushover or a wuss or wimpy, anything like that, right?
Well, another key point on this is that this habit is also important with your own team, because even people who are on your own team will sometimes look to push you and jump your boundaries. So one of the common things I hear from alumni who come through our program is that when I go to my management and when I go to my team leads and I say, hey, look, I can't sustain 75 hours a week. I can't do this. I understand that deadlines have been set by the customer and there's these boundaries, or, like we have these release deadlines, right? Like I can't sustain this. Like I have to have a family life. And the common response they get is, this is just kind of the way it is in consulting or in the Salesforce world. There's this kind of status quo expectation, which I personally totally disagree. I think there's an aspect of empowering people with even their own team members to leverage the same method of offering an offer while validating the ask and the assignment is also something that people should be. It's a rinse and repeat process whenever you need to protect your boundaries, because you're saying no by saying yes. And it's very difficult. It's like Tim Ferriss says, when you want to negotiate something really, really challenging, you always ask, does that sound reasonable? Because who can say no to that question?
Yeah.
Right? Because it sounds so reasonable. And that's really the goal here, is to come up with something so reasonable that it just becomes irresistible and you get your boundary protected, and ultimately that protects your team, and people start to love being with you and working with you because you lead with this example and take on kind of a mama bear, papa bear sentiment when it comes to protecting people's world. And that brings out the best in people, in my opinion.
John, I'd like to ask you something about this before we turn into the next little segment, which is going to be about turning chaos into compliments. Do you have any recommendations for the audience if they've made a bad commitment already and they need to get out of it?
Absolutely. And this will happen from time to time. Sometimes the courage to stand up and do this will come, after the fact. And so for me, I would always recommend, you can leverage the same principle just by going back and highlighting, this is what was asked for, this is what we committed to. And often I would highlight that the new element of clarity that's been received since that conversation. Maybe I've thought through my calendar now. Maybe I talked to one of my associates or my teammates and found out some additional information. Leverage that additional piece of information back into the conversation and highlight and say, I prematurely committed to that. And I I want to make sure that I respect the time of my peers in the same way I would want to respect your time. And so this is what I can do. So you basically walk through the same process with the new offer that you can make to them in light of that new information.
You know, you just brought up something very powerful, which was pulling in third party, right? Pulling in other people, right? This is a way of reducing the heat on you, right? You're demonstrating that you're looking out for others, and that the impact of what they're requesting isn't just an impact on you, but an impact on many people. And they're not in a position, the person, we'll call them an opponent, the person that is making the request isn't in a position to negotiate with all of those people. And so when you're showing up as the team lead, or maybe you're not a team lead, but you still know that your decisions are going to impact that team, you're demonstrating care for the team. And you can leverage that with the person that you're negotiating with, right? Such as, I'm very clear that if we do this, if we say yes to this, it's going to impact about 3 or 4 people immediately. There's going to be a ripple effect to all of their families over the weekend, right? So we're talking about 25 people that are going to be impacted by this enhancement to the demo that you're looking for. And look, we haven't known each other long. You seem like a really nice person. You also seem like the kind of person that probably doesn't want to negatively impact 25 people this weekend. So I've come up with an idea, a solution that I think is going to get you really, really close to what you're looking for, but keep the goodwill, not just for me, but everyone else on the team and everyone else that they go home to. That sounds reasonable, doesn't it? Right?
I totally agree. And I think highlighting that, because sometimes as a recon device, you'll find that the person was totally non-cognizant as to what the impact would be, which is very common in the Salesforce world, right? It's the Salesforce AE told me I can just point, click, create a field, and it just happens. Right. I don't know about all this custodian stuff and all the automation stuff and all of our governance programs. And I don't understand any of that. I just thought I was asking for something simple because that's what I was sold. And so leaning on that idea that people are probably coming to this not in a nefarious way, but really in an innocent way. And having that attitude and that kind of grounding initially is really, really valuable, so that they can respond and be like, thank you for sharing that with me. You're right. I would never want to ask for all of that. And so let's put it on the backlog and figure out when we can put it into place, right, in a more reasonable time. And then you learn a lot about that person.
I think the scenario that I run into, though, maybe more often is, and again, coming from a probably a good place still, like, they're not looking for everybody to have to, not spend time with their kids all weekend so that they can finish something. But a lot of, especially in the consulting world, they don't want to deliver bad news to the client. And it's easier to, lean into the team and get them to work overdrive rather than tell the client no. And that's where I think it is a little bit challenging, because it's like, well, I mean, I'm sorry, it's all hands on deck because but they just don't want to tell the client that's not the best way to move forward. That's not the, and I find so many consultants are just kind of yes people to their clients to a certain extent, rather than being realistic about how much things actually cost and how they maybe shouldn't be doing these certain things.
Many of these people don't need to make a lot of money and can still do a good job. And so they're afraid of getting undercut. They're afraid of losing the client. They're afraid of losing future business with the client. And so they all become yes men. I don't think it's a healthy thing at all. People like transparency. They want to know what's real. You've got to show them the value.
The only thing I'll say is, when I don't have an opportunity to negotiate with the customer, because you actually have to have a better idea of like what that customer is looking for, like that, but that takes interactions to figure out whether they're the kind one or the no, I need this now customer. Can't negotiate with the customer, you can negotiate with your team. I work at a company with great company culture where, like, yes, there will be days where I'm working relentlessly, but then like Friday I have off because I invested all that time earlier. So there's always opportunity to negotiate. That was my last thought.
Great. Yeah, that's a great reciprocity example, right? You feel good about that.
Very good. For our last section that you're going to be sharing with us is how to turn chaos into compliments. This is one of your one of your modules. What do you mean turning chaos into compliments?
So it goes to that example of we're let's imagine, right, whether an admin or we're a consultant, but we are at the table and we recognize that there's some people at the table, right? There might be an office manager, there might be, like a warehouse manager, maybe there's, could be a clerk, or could be what some would perceive in the business as a, kind of a lower level frontline staff person. All right. And in my experience, I've not found that those people are the most well-respected, most esteemed people inside the organization, although they should be. The other aspect is there's people on the team recognize when they hire a Salesforce consultant or they make a hire for a Salesforce, expert, an admin, an architect, the business has likely tried to solve whatever problems or innovations that they're trying to do. They've likely tried to solve it already and have not been successful, which is why you, me, may be there, right? So it's important to understand that there's already a level of potential embarrassment, potential vulnerability. People are putting their masks on, they're putting their protections on. They don't know if, as somebody mentioned earlier, I think it was Kimberly, right? That we might be coming for their job. That's what they think, right? So all these things are already present in the room before we ever get there. We have to understand that. So there's a setting, there's an environment there that is not conducive for people to be transparent, to be open, to be essentially to share about their scabs, their wounds, their bruises, right? For example, most Salesforce adoption problems actually are not technology related either. There's a tremendous allergy inside the organization of something prior that happened. Maybe it was the first release failed. Maybe it was the prior system was crazy. Maybe it was they just get berated and mocked by the technical people, like we've heard about the ID10T errors that people get in their technology, right? That spells idiot, by the way. So these are terrible ways that people get treated.
Now I feel like an idiot. Thanks, John.
Okay? Yeah,
Thanks
no
for
worries.
spelling it out, buddy.
Yeah, just that's like Saturday Night Live. Remember the guys like move, right?
Yeah.
So the goal of this is primarily two things. One is we have to create an environment that people are willing to share with us. They don't know who we are. We're intimidating. We're like the high-priced person coming in the room thinking that we know it all, right? Like the consultant on the office or office space. We have to create an environment where we can connect with people so that they'll share with us. Because unless we get to the truth, unless we understand why this failed and what the allergies are and what the elephants in the room and all of these things, right? Like, the people, politics, process, profit, product, we got to be able to get the truth on all that. If we don't create an environment where people can share, they won't share. And our project will be compromised because we never actually got to the real problem. So in order to do that, the temptation for a consultant who comes in and wants to establish themselves, they want to show people that they really know what's going on. And so they see a person open up, they're demoing this crazy Excel spreadsheet with like colored cells all over. We've all seen it, right? Greens and reds and all kinds of stuff. What's the temptation? The temptation is to exalt myself by potentially denigrating what's here. I can't believe you guys are using this. Oh my gosh, you guys have been able to get along with this, right? Now, it's not always, sometimes it's behind closed doors or whatever, but the point is that there's the risk of even accidentally denigrating someone's effort for the sake of exalting the fact that we're bringing a new solution and we're doing it rip and replace.
Someone built that. That's their whole job.
That's their whole job. And we have to recognize that, in fact, not only is it their whole job, but when they were put into this position, the boss said, sink or swim, figure it out. And this is the evidence and the artifact of them figuring it out. And so not only should they not be mocked, but they should be applauded. And the business hasn't been doing that. The business has likely disrespected them, saying, what is this crazy thing? I don't even like to see it. So chaos to compliments is a strategy where we go into the situation, one, to put the people at ease and to validate the hard work that they've done to basically get to the point where they can do what they were hired to do. And whatever it is that they've invented that actually is getting the job done, we want to highlight specific aspects of that are great. That's a great insight. That's a really good thing you're doing for the customer. Oh, wow, I can't believe you spend so much time doing that so that you can deliver on what the customer needs. That's the first thing. We validate that. While we're doing this, we are modeling to the rest of the business that this is the posture that we will be leading with in this project. You've hired us, or you've either hired me as a staff person or as a consultant to lead this project. This is the ethos by which we will be leading this process. We will be modeling that and demonstrating it to everybody.
John, I'm going to jump in real quick. Casey and I talk. Casey's my girlfriend, 4 years. Casey and I talk about this sometimes, and we call it a PTP, or a positive transitional phrase. Me being a dyed-in-the-wool ENTJ, just pick out any a-hole from any TV show. It's me, right? Like, it's John Hamm in Mad Men. It's Napoleon. It's Michael's boss in The Office. It's like, they can bowl people over, and they can just be like, yeah, no, like they might be smart, they might have really good ideas, but they can be challenged to recognize other people in the moment before they're like trying to be the smart guy or the smart gal in the room. So we call it PTP. And now it's just like, she might say something, and I'll be like, well, blah, 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 I'm going to do this. And she'll be like, PTP. I'll be like, hey, that's a really great idea. I like that it does this and that. And I didn't even think about that. And it slows me down too. Like, it slows me down. So now I'm taking in more information. We talked about seeing about an hour ago. We were talking about seeing, like, what information are you actually taking? And it slows you down and allows you to take in way more information while maintaining really goodwill. So this is just me saying, like, I get it.
Yes, I love it. And I want you to think about the dynamics in the room, because they're likely not the only person who has something to share, or who is potentially embarrassed or has been mocked previously about what they've been doing. So once they see that, hey, here's a risk taker, they chose to go first. And now look at the way the Salesforce Pro is guiding this conversation, affirming them, validating that, and in fact, finding future anchor points. That's a future lesson we have, but essentially those anchor points that we will want to put into the future Salesforce solution to maximize adoption, because it's something the customer loves, and it's something that really is part of the secret sauce of what they deliver. So we want to capture that and make sure we don't denigrate it in a rip and replace as though nothing in that is valuable. There's a lot that's valuable in there, though it might be cloaked. What I call, it's a rough diamond. It's a rough diamond. It's not yet been cut, but when it's cut, it's going to be amazing and beautiful. And my job is not to discard rough diamonds, even though they look like rocks, right? So when that's happening, the other people at the table who were afraid initially to share something, all of a sudden, guess what? That's interesting, because and now they are encouraged. And all of a sudden we have this popcorning and bubbling up of latent innovation that the business, again, a recon device, that the business has not been welcoming from these people, because they don't have respect for them. They don't think that they're at the level of strategic advisor or whatever it might be, but they are the frontline experts. They hear the customer complaint every day. They are absolutely the right person to bring this wisdom to the table, and we have to create the environment to give them that freedom. So when they know, I want to be next up for chaos to compliments, they're going to line up and they're going to just lay it all out. And they're going to be like, hey, even though I was the one who tried to make Salesforce work and I couldn't do it, I'm so happy that you're here, and I'm so happy to show you what I've done. And I did this, and I have this Excel spreadsheet and this Access database, and I have this legal pad, and I mean, whatever. And we just give compliments on all of that. No complaints, because it's all raw materials full of rough diamonds.
John, thank you so much for sharing this. This is wonderful insight into what People First Method does. It clearly demonstrates you've been through the ropes, man. Like, you've done it. I imagine you've done a fair amount of investigation and personal development yourself to be able to even come to this. Oh, look, I'm doing the chaos to compliments right now. It was unintentional, but I am. But like, you've clearly had to spend hours and years putting this kind of information together, that you're able to share it with people, share it with our audience today. We are so grateful. Thanks, everybody. This has been a wonderful show. Let's do a quick recap, shall we? We learned about a solution to get out of bad commitments, to say no by saying yes. We learned about turning chaos into compliments. I love both of these topics, by the way, John. Like, great selection for our program today.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Salesforce Trails and Trials. If you found this episode valuable, we would love your help reaching others. please subscribe, leave us a 5-star review, and share this with another who would benefit.